We're continuing unit 38, right? In the Moreno Shabbat units, the Menucha of Sir named Dangor and Sir Moses Montefiore. We're on the bottom of page 8, trying to figure out what kind of intention is required in order to be allowed to allow carrying things that were earlier muktzah on Shabbat. Says the Gemara in Daf Nun, Tanya. This Gemara was used to prove Rav Asi. Rav Asi said that you could use right yashav so it's enough to have one-time use. So the seifa, the second, if you've seen the second line here, right? So if you used these are we're talking about like linens that could be used as bandages. So if you use them as a bandage once, you can use them on Shabbat as well. But the Reisha seems to say that you have to have a lot more than that, right? If they're properly prepared. So the problem is that there's too big a difference between the beginning and the ending of this Braita. Right? The first part seems to say that you need to have them properly prepared, fully prepared. And the second half says it's enough, one-time use in passing will suffice to carry them. So which one is it? Says Tosfot, wait, hold on. Hooray, according to Rav Asi, if the one-time use in passing is not as effective as thinking and intending. So what the Braita should have said is either you intend and you think, or you use it once. That's what the Braita should have said. Why does it say it like this? So says Tosfot, like, this is an interesting point until you see the Tosfot right under that. This is the second line. This is Ri. Meaning, I painted it. Right, I want my linens to have a certain color. So we're talking about I want them to be some color. I colored it. Now it's painted. And then I said, oh, you know what? Not good enough. Since I intended on using it on a Tuesday, I can use it on Shabbos as well, even though I changed my mind, because I did a ma'aseh to prepare it. So there's an interesting point. It says that if I intend on using it not on Shabbat, it could be different from the intention of using it on Shabbat, which raises an important question. And these are two interesting questions. What happens if, we raised the question a few times. I'm going to go to the more fundamental point here. I have a stone, I want to use it as a doorstop, right? Is it now a doorstop just because I thought and intended to use it as a doorstop? Now it's no longer, okay, it's not Mukte this Shabbos, but is it actually a doorstop? Is that a correct depiction? Do you understand what I'm asking? I want to crack nuts on Shabbat. I don't have a good hammer, but I notice a stone that seems like a perfect shape for this. Now, I'm not going to keep the stone long term. I want to use it on Shabbat because that's when I have time to start cracking nuts. I don't have time during it. So I want to take a stone and I want to crack some nuts on Shabbat. Is that preparation? Could there be a middle ground is basically the question. Could there be things that they're not quite muktzah because I do have the intention or I did use it once or whatever preparation is required? They're not quite muktzah. I will be allowed to use them on Shabbos, but they're not a tool either. You see the question? Normally we have a dichotomy. We say either it's a tool or it's muktzah. Those are the options. Right? There's no middle ground here. Food, whatever. I'm saying it's something that I'm going to use once only on Shabbat. What about something I'm going to use once only on Shabbat? So the Rashba was asked this question. So we can see the Rashba and the Ran have an interesting take on this. So the Rashba, Aleph Tafshin Vav. Nishal, where is it? Page 9 by you or? Page 9. Od nishal, mi shemiyached even echad b'chalon be'erev Shabbat iftzah b'egozim to'ila ochana. So I set aside a stone that I'm going to use once to crack nuts on Shabbat, and I'm going to throw it out. says the Rashba, I'm going to look at the second paragraph. Even sheichada liftzua ba liyotam muchenet lekach, mashma desage behachi kivan delav bar miavadu. What am I supposed to do? It's a good shape. Let's do something to prepare it. Why? I need to chisel it. Well, why would I chisel it? It's perfect shape, but there's no reason to chisel it now, right? Says the Rashba, if shad legabe even nami ba sheishtamesh ba me'erev Shabbat liftzua ba kede pukrin kered dila ve'ba'ikir be'pikurin ve'tzipa. Meaning, I'm going to add the second Rashba to get a better understanding of what he's saying. Meaning, if I say, from now on, this will be my nutcracker. Great, now it's a tool. It's enough that I thought that, and that's enough. But if I say, I'm not going to keep this stone long term. I want this stone to use this stone as my doorstop forever and ever. It's a perfect shape. It's exactly what I need. Perfect. This is my doorstop. Wonderful. That works. But if I say, well, it's Friday afternoon, it's 5 minutes before Shkia, and I say, I need a doorstop. Okay, here's a stone. It's going to happen right after davening. You can kick it aside. We'll never see it again. We'll never see it again. Does that work? Is that good enough? So, you see the problem. Says the Rashba, so you didn't quite turn it into a doorstop, did you? So the intention isn't enough. So you have to actually use it. So that's why the Rashba says like this. This is another division between within the hierarchy. He says, if it's something that you intend on using as a tool long term, it's enough to think. But if it's something that you only intend on using this Shabbat one time, then you actually have to practice. You have to use it once first.
Yeah, demonstrate.
Go ahead.
In fact, you want to use it as a doorstop permanent.
Yes.
You have to do it physical.
No, Adrabah. In that case, you don't need anything. Yeah.
So you have to bring it into.
The question is, what's your intention? I think that's the point. The point is, if you intend on using it long term, so that intention is enough. Right? This fake Jarbanan. But so that what's interesting about the Rashba is that he's giving us trouble within the hierarchy, right? We thought life is simple. Life was simple, right? It's very easy. You have 4 options, and then each Rishon says a different option, and from there and up, and they also argue about what the hierarchy is, right? So a double machloket, right? What is the hierarchy? Right? Is single use better or worse than intention? That was one machloket. Second machloket was, who do we hold like, right? Within the hierarchy, right? Rabbi Yotam is the most machmir. Under that is Baal Hamor. Most Mekil is the Rush, and the Rambam is kind of more interesting, right? Because he says depends on how this came to you. This is something that's part of nature or not. Now the Rashba adds another layer of complication, since life wasn't fun enough, and says it depends on what you intend. If your intention is to use it to turn it into a tool, so yes, even intention is enough. But if you intend on using it only for the Shabbos, you have to practice using it as well. It's not enough to think, because your thought is what? Your thought is, I'm going to use this once and then throw it back out. So what is it now? That's the real point. I say tomorrow at 1 o'clock, tomorrow being Shabbos, at 1 o'clock, we're gonna finish lunch, I'm gonna crack some nuts with this stone. And then I'm gonna throw it out. So what is the tool now? What does the tool on Shabbos start? It's still Mukte. Why is it still Mukte? Because it'll stop being Mukte tomorrow at 1. There's no such thing. If I say from now this is my nutcracker, so now it's my nutcracker. Shabbos starts, it's my nutcracker, I can use it. But if I intend on using it only at 1 o'clock Shabbos afternoon, what is it now? It's still Mukte. Only at 1 o'clock and then 1:30 I'm throwing it out again. So it's still Mukte. And that's why you have to do something to make it part of my world. Now here we'll raise the interesting question of what happens if I didn't throw it out? Well, I didn't throw I didn't throw it out. And then comes next Shabbat, I say, oh, it's still here. Could I use it then? Very interesting question, right? What Gaxi say earlier about remuktzifying, right? So there. We're going to get back to that later on. We're going to get it. All right. The Ran disagrees. והאבן שעל פי החבית דאסרין במניח הניתם לפי שאין דרכה של אבן לאחד אותה לכיסוי חבית. ובכל מיני דרכי באחי ייחוד אחד יומי מהנה. So the Ran disagrees and says If you intend on using it tomorrow, already now, until you use it's a kli. It's a nutcracker from now until 1:30 when you're done using it. You're asking about remuctifying. We'll get to that. It's a good question. So, but that's correct, right? What happens at 1:30? It's remuctified. All right. So the Ran and the Rashba disagree, where the Rashba says, the Ran says there's no difference in saying I'm going to use this on Shabbos or I'm going to use this every Shabbos or every day. It's all the same. That's enough to think. That's the Ran's opinion. The Rashba says if you intend on turning this into your item, into your tool, then it's enough to think now to think about it. But if you want to use it once and then you'll never use it again, then you actually have to do something with it to prepare it.
Once means one Shabbat.
Yeah. Yes. This Shabbos. Yeah. It could be keeping his doorstop the whole Shabbos. I don't know. But the point is, comes the end of Shabbos or whatever, that stone will be gone. So C in the Shulchan Aruch, אסור לחזות פי חבית באבן או בבקעת או לסגור באבן את הדלת, אף על פי שחשב עליו מבעוד יום אסור, אלא אם כן יחדל לכך לעולם. That's the Rashba. That's the Rashba saying. So the Shulchan Aruch was like the Rashba and says if it was only a matter of intention, if you only intended on using it, but you intend on using it once, you can. יחדל השבת זה בלבד, לא. הנמילה בדבר שאין דרכה ליחדל לכך, כגון הנדע so the question is, how normal is it to do? So for example, if it's very common that people use stones such as these as doorstops, then it'll be enough to have the intention to use this stone as a doorstop, even if I'm using it only once. But if people don't normally use the stones for paperweights, then it's not enough to say, on Shabbos, I'm going to need a shear, I'm going to need a paperweight, I'll use that stone. You actually have to use it once or something like that. So, that's the Rambam. So forget the Yeshomim at the end, but here he shows us the Machloket, the Shulchan Aruch, showing us the Machloket in the Rashba and the Ran. Do you need long-term intention required? Okay, let's see the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan gives a very important definition. Aruch HaShulchan is the one who will mechadesh this concept of mukta, unmuktifying and remuktifying automatically on Shabbos, and say that there could be, I think he says better, because really there are two ways of looking at it. You can say, I discover, my shirt gets terribly stained on Shabbat. The stain will never come out. So I say, all right, that's the end of that shirt, right? Right. It's the end of that shirt. I'm going to throw it out now. Now, something that was a shirt could become muktzah on Shabbos, theoretically. I can go into the question of whether that works or not. We'll see that in the next year. But so theoretically, that could become muktzah on Shabbos just because it's no longer usable, right? My shirt gets caught on something, and then the whole shirt, right, the sleeve rips, and it's not a shirt anymore, right? Nothing I can do with this anymore. That's the end of that, right? That could be, and that might render it muktzah. And then we say, okay, what happens with this? What happens with this nutcracker, right? So I demuktified it by intending on using it on Shabbos, and I remuktified it by throwing it out the window after I used it. All right, but I had to do something in order to remuktify it. What about something I'm just going to use and then it will stay there forever? Let's say the stones that I pass by. Now, before Shabbat, I say, all right, I want to use that as my bench on Shabbat. But I don't want to use it as a bench on Shabbat. What happens right after I leave? Am I muktzifying it by leaving? Or is it more fundamental, meaning, or is it was never really a couch? It was always a stone, a stone that's in nature. But sometimes you could use things that are stones in nature. let's see Shulchan Aruch Harav and see the. Let's see. He sums this up. Shulchan Aruch Harav. You see it? Yisrael Shulchan and Shulchan Aruch Harav. All right, sorry. זכויות של דקל. יש מהם שמייחדים אותם לישיבה. יש מהם שעומדים בשרפה כשאר עצים. אם קצצה מן הדקל לשרפה, הרי הם מוקצה כשאר עצים. סולת התלם שאין תורת כלי עליהם, או אלו עומדים לשרפה. אבל אם נמלך עליהם אחר כך שיהיו עומדים ומיוחדים לישיבה, עד שיצטרך לפנותם, הרי מחשבה זו מוציאה מידי מחשבה ראשונה. נמלך כן קודם השבת, נעשה להם תורת כלי, ומוטלת עליהם בשבת, לסדרם וכולי. So when it comes to wood, to lumber, so since you had the wrong intention, you could re-intend, you can have the right intention later. No, before Shabbat. Of course, before Shabbat. Sorry? Yeah. אפילו אם לא נמלך עליהם שעומדים ומיוחדים לישיבה, לשחשב עליהם מבעוד יום, לישב עליהם למחר בשבת בלבד, ומוצ"ש ישתמש בהם לשרפה, מוטלת אותם מסדרם לישב עליהם בשבת זו. When it comes to logs that I brought into my home, it's enough to think and even a thought of using it once on that Shabbat. So, Nun Aleph is אפילו לא חשב עליהם כלל ישיבה, לשירה מקרה שישב עליהם, so even one time use in passing will also suffice. אבל שאר עצים, וכן נדבך אבנים אף שישב עליהם פעמים רבות בחול, וגם חשב עליהם שיהיו עומדים לישיבה גם בשבתות, עד שיצטרך לפנותם מכאן, לא ירד עליהם תורת כלי על ידי כך, לפי שאין דרכם של שאר עצים ואבנים ליחדם לישיבה, שאין נוח לשב עליהם כמו על חריות. לפעמים לא הוכנו לכך על ידי ישיבה, ועכשיו לבד, כל שלא יחדם לכך לעולם, אלא אם כן עשה בהם מעשה רב להכינם לישיבה, so he's holding like the Rambam here, לימדום, that you have to do some kind of serious מעשה הכנה. So when it comes to stones, things that you haven't done, so okay. The first category, he's holding like the Shulchan Aruch, yes? The first category is things that you brought into your home. And then they could have different uses, and therefore it's enough to have the intention of using them. That's enough. There are things that are in nature, that you have to do a proper ma'aseh. That's how the Rambam holds, that's the way he's holding here. Again, Ashkenazim are more mekel based on the Rosh. What I wanted is mostly Nun Gimel. Let's just sum up the Rambam and to see it well explained there. Nun Gimel, אסור לטלטל בקעת עץ או אבן לחצות בהם חבית או לסגור בהם את הדלת ולהכות בהם בברזה, לסתום את הנקב שבחבית, אף אם נשתמש בהם תשמיש זה פעמים רבות בחול, וגם חשב עליהם מבעוד יום להשתמש בהם תשמיש זה בשבת, אין זה מועיל כלום, אלא אם כן יחדם לכך לעולם, שאז ירד עליהם תורת כלי על ידי שהם יחדו לתשמיש זה לעולם. Now, see in the second line of the second paragraph. אבל אם חשב עליהם להשתמש בהם למחר, תשמיש את דרכם לייחד אותם לתשמיש זה, כגון שחשב על האבן לפצוע באגוזים למחר, אף על פי שלא יחדה לכך אלא לשבת זו בלבד, מוטל תטלה גם בכל צרכיו. כפי שכיוון שראויה להתייחד לכך לעולם, ודרכה בכך, וכך די לה בהכנה קלה להכינה לכך. Meaning, the idea is like this. I have something that people will normally set aside for this use. Since it's normal for people to set it aside for this use, it's enough to say, I'm going to use this for this Shabbat. Things that are not normally used for that use, then setting it aside for that Shabbat, it'll remain mukta. So what I have to do? I have to prepare them properly. That's the idea there.